Hey everyone, welcome to Out of the Reads with me, your host, Natasha Procagelo. And today on the show, we are talking with actually a family member of mine. Her name is Isabella Gorrie. She lives in Brisbane, Australia, and she's the mother of three. And I wanted to have her on the show because she started her motherhood journey at a very young age. And despite the fact of having come from a very religious upbringing and just all the hurdles that young motherhood brings. She has a very interesting story, and her birth story is one that I thought was very inspiring to share. So we'll be speaking with Isabella in a little bit. And of course, thanks for stepping into the reads with us today. And I figured we'd read from my Divine Feminine Oracle deck. Isabella is my cousin's daughter on my mother's side. So, with the mother being, just an element of discussion today, I figured we should pull a card from the Divine Feminine deck. And two cards fell out, actually. So, we have Varaj Yogini, the essence of all Buddhas. I have the power to make each moment sacred. Everything is material for my liberation. And then Marguerite Porret, the mystic of divine love. Love is divine, and I am nothing except love. So these two cards, and I love how they kind of relate to today's show. I have the power to make each moment sacred. Everything is material for my liberation. So much of Isabella's journey is about coming into her own and what liberation looks like when we do that. And the mystic of divine love. Love is in everything. So why not bring it into our story today? So I'd like to get into the reads with Isabella today. So see you on the other side. This is Isabella Gorrie. And I was saying to her just a second ago, we've literally come full circle because I was at your birth and now all of those things.
Yeah.
But the reason I really wanted to interview you is because at least of the family that I'm the closest with and that I know the best, you're probably the youngest mother who has been in our family. And I know our family well, you know our family well. It comes with a lot, so I was just curious what that was like for you.
It's been, like you said, it's been a journey. I became a mother at a very young age. So my oldest, I was 17 when I found out that I was pregnant with Gabby, not even 2 months after finishing high school. So it really was a throw into the real world. And I mean, now I'm 24 now. I've got 3 kids. I would say at first it came as a shock to the family. There was a lot of mixed feelings, especially like my mum and my grandma and everyone. They came from very religious upbringing. So obviously there was a lot of mixed emotions to start with. There was a lot of bittersweetness to it. Me and my now husband, my boyfriend at the time, we were trying to figure out how we would tell them. So we told my mum first.
Okay.
And we told her the day after we found out because I was just like, we can't keep it from them and they're going to find out
Right.
sooner or later. There were a lot of tears and it wasn't necessarily the happy occasion that
Sure.
one would hope for it to be, but we were prepared for that kind of from the get-go. My partner, he told his parents by himself. He also came up in quite a religious family. And so there was a little bit of excitement on her part, and she is a midwife. So from that aspect as well, she was there in a different kind of support level from the get-go. It was kind of that level of information that was so helpful. Was so helpful.
Not everybody has like an in-law who is a midwife. Your husband, Jeremiah, he is also from a really large family,
so
right?
he's one of 9 and he is the 7th child. So he's on the younger side, but this was the first grandbaby. None of his other siblings had had kids yet, which was also an additional layer of these mixed feelings is that I had pretty good relationships with all of his siblings. And I knew that a few of his older sisters were struggling with fertility issues and had been trying for some time. And so there was this anxiety around telling people this is such a happy occasion, but also feeling bad that it was me and not them. There was that negativity kind of around it as well, which wasn't the best way to start things off. But All of his brothers and sisters were so excited that there was going to be a baby. It surprisingly found that I think my dad took it the worst out of everyone.
Really? You thought he would take it, like, better than your mom?
I don't necessarily know if I thought he was going to take it better. However, out of all of the parents, I would say that he was the least religiously involved at the time.
Mhm.
But my mum actually told my dad, and he didn't speak to me for probably 3 days afterwards.
Okay.
So I was still living at home at the time.
Yes.
So you could feel the heaviness.
Mhm.
And he needed that time to process things. Eventually, he came around and we talked about it. But that was something that I didn't expect at the time.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't really something that you had planned, but did you know from an early age, like, I always knew I wanted to be a mom and this was like a trajectory I was always going to go on? Or was this like, I don't know how I feel about this?
Yeah, I definitely knew I wanted to be a mum. It wasn't necessarily something that I thought about heaps. I
Mhm.
mean, I'd finished school, I was enrolled in uni, should
Mhm.
start uni at the start of that year. I was to start my first full-time job. So I kind of didn't expect it to be on the cards until years down the track at least.
And before you were also modeling at one point too, I remember. So like was that a trajectory for you? Was that like something that you had thought like maybe this could be a career path for me?
So I was into modeling for a little while. I did a few shows and a couple competitions and things like that. And I did consider it as a career path at
Mhm.
one point, getting into something along those lines. But I also I never was really that serious about it. I think when I was younger, there was an interest in modeling and acting and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. But growing up, if you wanted to go to something, your parents had to take you. And there
Right.
was never really that kind of match in commitment with me and my parents of, hey, I'd like to go and do
Okay.
this. They were like, well, figure it out yourself then.
Got it.
And so it was, I guess, never something that I really saw myself taking to a professional level just because I was like, I kind of felt like I'd already missed the train for getting
Mhm.
into it seriously. So
Okay. Yeah, it's just so interesting the different trajectories that life takes us on. Were you the first of your friends to have kids?
So actually, it was such strange timing. We found out that we were having Gabby, and within
Mhm.
the span of that month, two of Jeremiah's really close friends found out that they were also having kids.
Wow.
And so,
No way.
yeah. And so all of us found out Gabby was born in mid-September, and one of
Mhm.
his friends, their daughter was born at the start of August, and then the other
Okay.
was born start of September, so just a couple weeks before Gabby. All
Wow.
girls, all within the span of 2 months time frame of each other. Yeah, it was this insane timing where all of us were like, well, I guess we're all doing this kind of together.
Do you all still get together with the kids, or how is that now?
Yeah, so one of them, we do still see them and their kids, on
Mhm.
occasion. And the other, which was one of Jeremiah's best friends since middle
Mhm.
school, last year when I was pregnant with my third, he actually passed away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there was an accident at work, and so he passed away. And so his partner, which Jeremiah actually introduced the two of them because he worked with his partner during high
Mhm.
school. She has their three kids, which are
Oh
similar
my
age to our
gosh.
three. And so we still try and catch up with them,
Yeah,
but it's a bit
I would
hard
think so.
to see
Yeah.
the kids. So we all went to school together, and it's a bit of a hard situation to
Wow.
be in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously her
Yeah.
situation sounds like it's very difficult. She's a young, now
Yes.
single mom, it sounds like, of 3. So
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
extremely difficult. What's been the hardest thing for you, though, in your experience? And I don't know if it's just the fact that, okay, having 3 kids is hard in and of itself, or do you
Yeah.
find that there's any other challenges because of your age, or are there any strengths because of your age?
Yeah. I would say there's definitely strengths and challenges. I think a big thing for us is when we knew we were going to have Gabby at a young age, we talked about it and we're like, well, we're already young
Mhm.
parents. and we want more than one
Right.
child, we may as well continue to have them. We didn't want particularly big age gaps between the kids. And there was kind of that level of, not that we lost our young years to children, but our young years were now going to be filled with
Mhm.
parenting, that it was, well, we may as well fully commit that be this season of
Mhm.
life, so that then our older season of life is a
Right.
reverse of our young years are now our old years. We look like, well, there's no point in
For siblings.
waiting and feeling like our 20s were for our kids, but now our 30s and our 40s were. Because it was something that I saw with
Mhm.
my mum. There's quite a decent age gap between me, my older sister, and my two younger sisters. So there was a 8-year gap between me and
Mhm.
Yana, the third
Yeah.
youngest, and then another two before Julia. And so kind of seeing how at a young age my parents were parents, and now they're in their 50s now and they still in the thick of parenting. We didn't
I think
particularly.
a lot of people, at least that I've encountered, being younger parents, there's usually the one
Yeah.
that you had when you were younger, and
Yeah.
then you're saying the gap with, okay, now we're gonna
Yeah.
have the kids and do this, but it's like there's 2 separate times. So you've committed and you're like, "Let's just do it now and have this be the thing," and then later on, we'll be like, "Well, all the heavy lifting was done, and I don't have to feel like I'm running out."
I think it does come with its own set of
Mhm.
challenges. I think there is a level of not necessarily feeling like you're being taken as
Mm.
seriously because you're a young
Mm.
parent. I mean, especially with Gabby and, birth and in
Mhm.
the hospital, I felt like I had a really hard time having
Yeah.
my voice heard
Yeah.
or being taken seriously because there was just this level of, she's young and it's her first time. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right.
Which, I mean, I'm sure women of all ages and backgrounds experience, but there was this very clear, she doesn't know what she's talking about because she's just a child
Right.
level. Yeah.
Did you experience that with Elias and also with Rosemary too?
I definitely think that it wasn't as bad.
Mhm.
And I think that was probably because my first birth was very traumatic. And going into my second and third was able to really lay down the groundwork and have more of a plan in place. These are my non-negotiables, or even just feeling like I could ask questions and push back if I wasn't okay with
Yeah.
something, which at the time with Gabby, it was a whirlwind. It was during COVID, so there were a lot more restrictions in place at the hospital at the time,
Mhm.
and also just not
Yeah.
knowing, like, is this normal? At Gabby's birth, mother-in-law, she was actually about to start a shift at the hospital because I gave birth at the hospital that she works
Okay.
at. And so she actually came over to Birth Suite to check in on us and see how things were going. And she was actually
Oh my
there when I
gosh, that's
had Gabby.
amazing.
She walked in maybe 5-10 minutes before I had
Wow.
her. And she was actually able to stay and be part of the birth. I actually think worked out to be just divine
Mhm.
timing because she was just that level of support and knowledge in the
Mhm.
situation of being like, no, this is okay. She was there for me. She was there for my
Yeah, you went through a
husband.
lot. I
And
remember, like, walk me through what happened again because I know there was something that happened with like your cerebral spinal fluid or something.
yeah, so it was all a bit crazy. So my water actually broke at home, which I've since come to find isn't actually all that common. And we were getting ready for bed and I stood up off the couch and it just broke. And I was like, I either just peed myself or my water broke. So I was like, let me just wait a few minutes because it'll be pretty embarrassing if I go to the hospital and I've just peed myself. So we were actually not supposed to leave because both of us were waiting back on COVID
Oh.
tests because we'd both been unwell.
Oh.
And so I had to call the COVID hotline at midnight. Like, hey, I'm in labor. I need to leave my house and go to the hospital. I need our test results
Yeah.
now. And thankfully everything was fine. So we went in and, my contractions started picking up after my
Right.
water broke. And at that point I was already over it. And so, I pushed through maybe about 4 hours and then I was like, no, give me the epidural. So I got the epidural. I was able to get some sleep. And then, it was go time. And I pushed for quite a long
Mm.
time. And so they ended up giving me an episiotomy and they had to vacuum
Oh,
Gabriella out,
wow.
do the suction. And so thankfully that was all sorted. And so she went over to the nursery for a little bit because obviously the birth it had been a bit
Sure.
traumatizing for her
The
because
suction.
she's been in the
Yeah.
birth canal so
Yeah. Yeah.
long. So they wanted her to be monitored. And after a while, I was able to get over to the ward, and we were in the public hospital system. So Jeremiah's not able to stay overnight once I'm back on the
Okay.
ward. So he stayed around for a little bit and then he had to leave. And my mother-in-law was able to keep an eye on me. And she came in and I was like, I can't lie down.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do it. It hurts so bad to lie down. Like, it's excruciating. So the first night I actually slept sitting up with a pillow on the
Ugh.
little table that they gave me because I couldn't lie down. And at this stage, she was a little bit concerned. She was like, this isn't
Isn't
normal.
normal.
And it was coming into the weekend. And so they were like, well, the doctors aren't really going to do anything before Monday unless she's dying. So, she'll be fine.
Which you could have been.
Yeah, which I could have been. So they were like, she'll be fine. She's just being dramatic. So then come to day 2, I was able to lie down and I couldn't get back up. I was like, I'm lying down. I was like, I can't stand up.
My
I was
God.
like, even trying to bring the bed up a
The
little
bed
bit
up.
was just excruciating. Like, it feels like my head's on fire
Oh my
and my
God.
back hurts so bad. I was like, I can't do it. So most of the second day I was bedridden. So at that point, I mean, they're giving my daughter formula in the nursery because I can't go over to feed her,
You can't even feed her. Oh my God.
which I'm like, obviously, feed the baby. She needs to eat.
Right. She needs to eat.
So I'm not
Like,
going to say, no, don't give the baby formula.
yeah.
So towards the end of the second night, I was able to sit up a little bit. So they'd been able to bring me a hospital pump and I'd been able to at
Right.
least send some milk over to her. And I think it was night 2, I had a nurse, and I'll never forget this one experience I had with this nurse that I pressed my call button. I was like, I need to go to the bathroom, but I can't walk. I'm like, I'm in a
Right.
room of 4. And so
Yeah.
the room's just on kind of the other side of where my bed is. I'm like, can you get me a wheelchair so I can
Right.
go to the
Go
bathroom?
in.
And she just looked at me and she said, no, you can walk. She's like, I'm not getting you a wheelchair. You're being dramatic.
Dramatic again. Oh my
And
God.
stayed there and waited until I got up and walked to the bathroom in like the most excruciating pain of my life. Because I was like, well, I'm not going to wet the bed.
My God.
So, but she was just, no, you're fine. You'll walk. And so obviously they have railings alongside all the hallways. So I was able to kind of get myself up and try and force myself to walk over to the nursery to see
Yeah.
Gabby because I
Oh
really
my
hadn't
gosh.
been able to, maybe twice since she'd been born, and
And
sit
did they
there.
know what this was called?
At this stage, no, I really hadn't been seen by the doctors at that point. It was just the
Okay.
nurses and the midwives looking after me.
Right.
So there was this level of maybe she's just not bouncing back from birth very well.
Right.
Maybe,
For normal.
yeah, exactly. And again, there was
Mhm.
no comparison for me to go off. So I was just,
Right.
this must be normal. This
Mhm.
must be kind of what every woman goes through. And I just didn't know.
Mhm.
And so this was day 3, and they were like, okay, well, the doctors will come around later on and get you all checked off, and then you can probably go home this afternoon. I said, okay. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try and pump a little bit more so I maybe have some milk to take home with us. And I hooked myself up to the hospital pump and I turned it on, and I don't remember a lot of what happened after this, but I remember my body just starting to shake uncontrollably. Like,
Oh
the
my
second
God.
I turned on the hospital pump, just my entire body started shaking, and I remember trying to reach over to hit the call button, and I
Button.
just couldn't because my body is just flailing all over the place.
Oh my God.
And then I blacked out, and the next thing I come to, I'm in a random hospital room with an oxygen mask, and the best way I can explain it is one of those scenes in those movies where they're coming to in this random hospital room with that oxygen mask on, like, where am I? Because I just
What
had no
happened?
idea what was happening.
Yeah.
And, my partner was there and his mum was there and my mum was there. And I remember one of the nurses or the midwives, they'd said, okay, we're gonna, bring in your baby to be with you. You're getting transferred. And I remember looking at her and saying, what baby? Because I had completely forgotten that I'd had a child.
Oh
I was
my
like,
God.
I'm the baby. That's my mum. I'm the baby, right?
Right,
Right?
right.
And they brought in Gabby, and I was like, "What is happening?" I had
Oh my
fully,
God.
like, lost memory of having a kid, and I was like, "I'm
How
so
long did the
confused.
amnesia
I
last
don't know
for?
what's happening." It was fairly short-lived, thankfully. So, like, the next time that I was kind of, more alert and aware of things, I remembered, but it was just in that moment, I was like, "What are you talking about?"
What?
And so then they ended up transferring me to one of the bigger hospitals in Brisbane. Jeremiah had to take Abby home by himself. And for the first 2 days, I was in that hospital by myself, bedridden. I couldn't get up. I was in the worst pain that I'd ever experienced in my life. I was like, afterwards, I was like, I would have 100 kids before ever going through that kind of pain again.
Yeah, yeah.
That I was just like, "This is the end." I was like, "I can't possibly survive
Go on
this."
after this. Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole time I was so determined. I was like, "I'm going to feed my daughter." I couldn't get up. So the nurses there would come and sit with me and roll me onto my side so that I could
So
hook
that you could
myself up
pump.
to a pump and pump milk for Gabby.
Oh my.
Finally, after 2 days, they were able to get approvals from the higher ups, the B, to bring Gabby in and stay with me. So, yeah, after about a week, I was able to get sent home. And what they'd figured out is when I'd gotten my epidural put in, I don't know if it had just been inserted in a little bit too far or what the situation was. But when it had come out and spinal fluid had started leaking out, which isn't uncommon, usually a little bit of that can happen and no one's the wiser. But it had then been dropping the pressure that was in my brain, which had been
Mhm.
causing these headaches. And the pressure in my brain had just dropped so far that my brain started bleeding. And so I had
Oh my God.
um, MRIs and scans, and they'd found my brain was bleeding in 4 different places. So they knew what had caused it. You're not going to continue to have seizures, but seizure protocol is you can't drive for 6 months. That in and of itself then kind of had this added, I'm going home, I'm taking care of this human being, this child. I can't take care of myself or her.
Mm.
And I don't know if it was a side effect of the seizure or the medication or both, but in that first month or so, there would be often times where I would just lose feeling in one side of my body or like in my arm just randomly. And so I would remember like I would get up to change her in the middle of the night. I'd have her
Mhm.
on the change table and then I lose feeling in one of my arms and I'm like, I can't pick her up. So I'm,
Oh my God.
calling to my husband to come and get her because I'm like, I can't pick her up. I, like, can't feel my arm, and just this feeling of helplessness of, like, to be
Mm.
able to, do these basic things of changing my baby and picking her up and holding her, and so there
Right.
was a lot of anxiety of I didn't wanna be
Mhm.
left at home by myself with her, and my husband had just started a full-time job right after either right
Mhm.
before or right after I'd had her. And so every morning we would get ready and he would take me over to my parents for the day because I was just like, I can't be here by myself with her. I can't do it.
Alone.
Which
Mhm.
I'm sure I could have. Like, I'm sure I would have been fine. But I was just like, I can't.
But that
Yeah.
feeling of,
I'm
yeah,
like,
insecurity.
yeah. And so that was just it from the get go. We were just over at mum and dad's day in and day out.
Wow.
And yeah, which I guess kind of led to I didn't really take maternity leave with
Mhm.
either of my first 2 kids. With Gabby, I wasn't actually entitled to it. Government
Okay.
maternity leave here in Australia is you need to have worked for the 10 of the 13 months prior to having a child
Okay.
to qualify. And so I'd only worked for 9, just short. And I worked for my dad at the time. And so,
Okay.
I was already over at their house every day. And I was like,
Right.
she's a baby. She's not doing anything. And my mum was there. My older
Right.
sisters were there. I was like,
So you just continue to work.
I may as well. So I think I went back to work
Yeah.
maybe 2 weeks after having her because that was when I got home from the hospital.
Mhm. Wow. So you had, like, no break really to catch up on, like, the whole traumatic experience of your
Not
birth
really.
with her.
Yeah, at the time I was just like, "Well, that's fine. We'll just keep doing our thing," and didn't really see any issues with it at the time. And I think
Mhm.
only when we decided we were going to have another child and
Mhm.
we struggled to have Elias, my pregnancy with Elias was a very anxious pregnancy of just, worrying that it would be the same thing.
Mhm.
There was a lot of fear going into birth.
Mhm.
I ended up actually getting induced with him because I had gestational diabetes. So I had an
Okay.
induction with him and it was like day and night. Like his
Mm.
birth was so straightforward. It was so peaceful, very quick in comparison.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
I was very confident going into it. I was just like, I'm not getting the epidural. I did end up having it again because I think
That's brave of you to do it again. Yeah. Yeah.
I immediately went back to laboring with Gabby and they checked that I was 4
Mhm.
centimeters and it was another almost 12 hours before I had her.
Right. Right.
And I knew in that moment I had mentally flicked to the
Yeah.
switch of I can't continue. And so the epidural for Elias was much more from a mental
Mm.
state of things where I was like, I
Mhm.
need this. And part of it felt actually very healing afterwards, getting it to feel like I was able to reclaim a bit more positivity around the
Mm.
experience because the
Mhm.
previous was so negative. And the rest of it was a breeze. I mean, I got the epidural, and then I think an hour later, they were like, okay, we're ready to
Wow.
push. And I was like, what do you mean? We were scheduled to leave on
Mhm.
day 3, which was the day that I was supposed to leave with Gabby. And I remember going to leave the hospital and just bursting into
Oh my
uncontrollable
gosh.
tears because there was just so much pent
Fear
up
and anxiety.
fear and
Yeah.
anxiety around if I leave, something's going to
Mhm.
happen. And I cried the
Yeah.
whole drive home. And thankfully, nothing obviously happened. And postpartum was much kinder the second time
Mhm.
round. When I found out that we were having
Mhm.
Rosie, grandma was very anti-epidural. She was like, obviously you don't need that. That's,
I can
taking
see
the
her
easy
saying
way
that.
out, as grandma
Mhm.
is. And yeah, with both epidural and with Gabby and Elias for multiple reasons. Obviously, with Gabby, there was just so many complications that I didn't end up being able to
Mhm.
breastfeed either
Mhm.
of them. They both went to, well, with Elias, I
Mhm.
mixed fed for the first few months before he ended up going to formula
Yeah.
because it just with work made more sense. But so it was kind of this similarity of with both accepting the epidural and not being able to breastfeed, feeling like,
Right.
I'd
Right.
failed.
Right.
Like, I hadn't been able to like do the full birth or I hadn't been able to, feed my own
Mhm.
baby. And so going into having Rosie, it was kind of this ability to be like, I don't actually need to prove to anyone that I can
Right.
do this in a certain way. Um, I'm not actually gaining anything from doing it without. I mean, obviously, it's a beautiful experience to be able to do it without, and there's pros and
For
cons to
sure.
both. But I actually can make these decisions, and it doesn't mean I'm taking the easy way out or that I'm any less than someone that has done it without the epidural. It just
Exactly.
means that this is how I'm doing it. But letting that guilt and that feeling of
Yes.
being less than go, it took a few times, but to just be like, it actually doesn't matter what
And
other people say.
and the fact that you've come to it in your 20s, that says a lot too. I mean, some of those things I don't think I arrived till much later in my 30s,
Mm,
which is why aging has been so enjoyable because I'm like, well,
yeah,
I don't care as much as I used to anymore. I think that it's fantastic that you've been able to find that
mm,
because it is so freeing. That feeling like you're talking about, it's so debilitating and crushing to feel like at times you're your own worst enemy, and it's mostly up here and in here.
yeah.
So I'm glad that you've shifted from that.
Oh, it definitely is. It definitely is. And I think having such different experiences of having a baby, Gabby and Rosie kind of just happening. And then with Elias, we kind of just assumed that it would happen. And you're like, Gabby just happened. It'll just kind of work its way out. So we found out that we were pregnant. We found out the day we were leaving for a family holiday with all our in-laws. Like, great, we'll see the
Mm.
in-laws while we're on holiday. It's amazing. So we told everyone. Everyone was very excited. And then we got home from the holiday and I started to miscarry. And so
Oh,
it
wow.
was not something that we again had ever navigated, and we
Right.
Like, how do we do this? And that was such a hard thing to go through.
Yeah.
So we continued to
Mhm.
try, and 3 months later, we found out that we were pregnant again. We thought, great, maybe we'll just kind of see how it plays out. And again, within the span of a week from finding out that I was pregnant, we lost that baby and said, okay, we'll just keep trying again. It'll happen when it's supposed to happen. We had a holiday over to New Zealand planned. So we took Gabby, we went over to New Zealand, and then I found out that I was pregnant while I was in New Zealand. So I thought, great, we're going to be home in a few days. Let me just book an appointment with my doctor. Got to the doctor, did our bloods and everything. Yep, everything's all good. And then a couple weeks later, I started to miscarry. And at that point, it was just kind of, what's wrong? Like, is it me?
Right.
Is it something
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
doing? And just not really understanding why it wasn't happening. The discussions about, other options were on the table, which was kind of scary to think about. I mean, I was only, 20, 21 at the
Yeah.
time. And they
Right.
were like, "Oh, there's IVF and IUI," and it was a lot to kind of get my head around. I mean, I'd become familiar with the process because some of Jeremiah's sisters had gone through it,
Mhm.
and I was like, "I don't know if I am ready to go through that kind of thing. That's a lot." And so I think it was at the year mark, and I made a doctor's appointment to go in and look at a whole host of different things. And this whole time, I also have a kidney condition. So I
Right.
was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just go back on my medications for now because I can't take my
Mhm.
medications while I'm pregnant. I'll go
Mhm.
back on them for now. And the day before my doctor's appointment, I found out that I was pregnant with Elias.
Oh my gosh.
And what should be a very exciting time, I, I took that test and I saw that it was positive, and there just wasn't any excitement there.
I'm
'Cause
sure
it was just deep down, I was just like, it was
I
hard
might lose this
to
baby.
yeah, it was hard to
Yeah.
gain any attachment. It was just like, well,
Mhm.
we'll just see what happens, and just
Mm.
starting from the get-go of it probably won't work out,
Right.
which was really hard.
I can only imagine. I mean, the fact that you not expecting to have a baby and then being faced with that, being faced with so much trauma and almost even life
Mm,
threatening to almost have lost your
mm,
life, in delivering your child or thereafter. Then to try to have another child when you're ready and being faced with 4 miscarriages.
mm.
I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, so
That's a lot. At such a young age
yeah,
too.
it was, and I mean, throughout that, like, I'd spoken to my mother-in-law about it,
Mhm.
but I hadn't really told anyone in my family. Like, we
Mhm.
hadn't told any of them about any of the pregnancies, when they were
Mhm.
happening, because there was also this, we were then married at that point,
Right.
and I
Right.
was like, "We're adults, we have a house, we're married, we have another
Right.
we're gonna have other kids at some point." But, every time I found out I was pregnant, I was like, "Oh god, how am I gonna tell my parents?"
Mhm.
It was a really tricky experience to try and navigate because at the end of the day, I know they would have been there for me, obviously. But it was almost this it doesn't matter how old I am or if I'm married or, how far down the track I am. They kind of always were just like, oh, but you're so young. I'm like, yeah, but
Mhm.
at what point am I not so young anymore? At what point is it like acceptable for me to start having more kids?
Right. Right.
When we finally when we found out we were having Rosie, I was like, "I don't wanna tell mom and dad," because it just felt like you were,
Right.
being told off by your parents for doing something you weren't supposed
Sure.
to. But
Right.
it kind of
Wow.
when I found out that I was pregnant with Rosie, it just kind of I came to this realization of they're always gonna have mixed feelings about it, and it
Probably.
was kind of a bit sad to be like, "Well, they should
Mm.
be happy for me."
Mhm.
It was kind of a bit of a bittersweet realization of they're never going to be 100% happy about it. And
Mm.
I was like, well, if that's their prerogative, that's their prerogative. I can't make them.
I hope you are your biggest fan because you can do hard things. You do them very well.
Mm.
I'm so glad you spoke with me and you shared your story. And I know there was some things we didn't even get to, but if you could share one thing with someone who maybe is a younger parent or maybe has the idea that they would continue to like to have children despite maybe losing, what would you say?
I think my biggest piece of advice that I try and pass on to everyone in one way or the other is I think some people forget that it's everyone's first time on earth doing what they're doing. You know, obviously,
100%.
as a parent, like your kids are just figuring it out. This is their first time experiencing all these big feelings. And looking at my parents, it's sometimes easy to forget that even though they're much older than me, this is their first time going through what they're going through right now. I always think, looking back, I'm never going to regret giving grace to others
Mhm.
and giving grace to myself.
I love that. Well, thanks so much for being here and for talking with me, Bella. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more in the future.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me on. It's been lovely to chat.
Well, thanks for stepping out of the reads with us today. I hope that you got something out of today's show. Isabella's story is one that I feel like is very relatable to all women in different stages of our motherhood and just the transition of growing and coming into our own as a person. Of course, always please support the show. You can follow us on Buzzsprout, Instagram. Feel free to get some of the backstory of how I even started the podcast by ordering my book, The Art of Motherhood. It's got art from my postpartum journey, poetry, and memoir. As always, thank you for being here and listening. Follow on my website, outofthereads.com. For more updates later in the year, we're looking to do a women's retreat, and we're also planning on starting up the Art of Motherhood book group again. So if you're in the Jacksonville area, give us a shout out and follow along to see when that's going to happen. As always, thanks for joining, and we'll catch you next week.